9/11 and its aftermath awakened this nation to danger, to the true ambitions of the global terror network, and to the reality that weapons of mass destruction are being sought by determined enemies who would not hesitate to use them against us. Under the Bush Doctrine, a regime that harbors or supports terrorists will be regarded as hostile to the United States. As President Bush has said, time is not on our side. Saddam has perfected the game of cheat and retreat and is very skilled in the art of denial and deception. A return of inspectors would provide no assurance whatsoever of his compliance with UN resolutions. On the contrary, there is a great danger that it would provide false comfort that Saddam was somehow back in his box. Armed with an arsenal of these weapons of terror and seated atop 10% of the world's oil reserves, Saddam Hussein could then be expected to seek domination of the entire Middle East and subject the United States or any other nation to nuclear blackmail. Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us. The Middle East expert, Professor Fuad Ajami, predicts that after liberation, the streets in Basra and Baghdad are sure to erupt in joy in the same way throngs in Kabul greeted the Americans.
In Vice President Cheney's speech a week ago today, he said inspection was actually dangerous because it would create a false sense of comfort. So which is it? Do we believe that inspection should go forward even though they are dangerous? Or are we supposed to believe that they are dangerous and therefore they shouldn't go forward?
Well, the history of the inspections when they took place did lead to a lot of question marks. That's why I said that inspections in and of themselves, inspectors in and of themselves, are not a guarantee that Saddam Hussein is not developing weapons of mass destruction.
Does the President think inspectors should go into Iraq or not?
The President does.
If Saddam does allow those inspectors in, does he avoid regime change?
The policy of the United States is regime change, with or without inspectors.
Tariq Aziz said this morning, he characterized you and several other people in the Bush administration as warmongers, as using the issue of inspections as a pretext to try to topple the regime. And he said he is willing to sit down and talk about all of the issues involving Iraq.
Well, I've met with Tariq Aziz a number of times, both in Baghdad and in Washington and elsewhere. Clearly he does the bidding of his master, Saddam Hussein. They have, over a good many years, demonstrated wonderful talent and skill at manipulating the media and international organizations and other countries. When it's the right moment to lean forward, they lean forward. When it's the right moment to lean back, they lean back. And it's a dance. It's a dance they engage in.
The point that I would emphasize to you is that the threat from Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, potentially nuclear weapons capability, that threat is real. We only need to look at the report from the International Atomic Energy Agency this morning, showing what has been going on at the former nuclear weapons sites to realize that. And the policy of inaction is not a policy we can responsibly subscribe to.
We just heard the Prime Minister talk about the new report. I would remind you that when the inspectors first went into Iraq and were finally denied access, a report came out of the IAEA that they were 6 months away from developing a weapon. I don't know what more evidence we need.
Is Iraq's regime of President Saddam Hussein a clear and present danger to the United States?
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein's regime is a danger to the United States and to its allies, to our interest It is also a danger that is gathering momentum, and it simply makes no sense to wait any longer to do something about the threat that is posed here. As the President has said, the one option that we do not have is to do nothing.
The President has, I think, put it exactly right. He has said that the one choice we don't have is to do nothing.
As the President has said, and as Prime Minister Blair said yesterday, doing nothing is no longer an option.
He has aggressively sought to acquire chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons over the years.
This is a man who has attacked his neighbors twice, who represses his own people.
He used chemical weapons both against the Kurds and against the Iranians during the 1980s.
Who is continuing to develop weapons of mass destruction, has not disarmed.
He's launched ballistic missiles against 4 of his neighbors over the years.
Who's tried to assassinate a former American president, who pays $25,000 to Hamas bombers, by the way, some of whom blew up Hebrew University, and with it 5 Americans.
Before the Gulf War, back in 1990, we had reason to believe then that he had established a program to try to produce a nuclear weapon.
We went in and were able to find out that they were within 6 months to a year of having a nuclear weapon.
History shows that you are always surprised about how quickly someone acquires a terrible weapon. We were surprised that the Soviet program was as far along as it was. We thought it would be 1955, it was 1949.
We have to assume there's more there than we know. What we know is just bits and pieces we gather through the intelligence system, but nobody ever mails you the entire plan.
Our intelligence is always imperfect, and we usually find out that what we don't know is the most troublesome.
He now is trying, through his illicit procurement network, to acquire the equipment he needs to be able to enrich uranium.
Aluminum tubes.
Specifically aluminum tubes. There's a story in the New York Times this morning.
Reporting just this morning that he is still trying to acquire, for example, some of the specialized aluminum tubing one needs to develop centrifuges that would give you an enrichment capability.
Scott Ritter, a former United Nations weapons inspector, today addressed the Iraqi National Assembly and basically made the point that there are no problems as far as Iraq is concerned. Listen specifically to what he said.
The rhetoric of fear that is disseminated by my government and others has not to date been backed up by hard facts that substantiate any allegations that Iraq is today in possession of weapons of mass destruction or has links to terror groups responsible for attacking the United States.
We have facts, not speculation. Scott is certainly entitled to his opinion, but I'm afraid that I would not place the security of my nation and the security of our friends in the region on that kind of an assertion by somebody who's not in the intelligence chain any longer.
Is there any hard evidence directly linking the Iraqi government to al-Qaeda and the 9/11 terror attacks against the United States?
There is certainly evidence that al-Qaeda people have been in Iraq.
We've seen in connection with the hijackers, of course, Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker, did apparently travel to Prague on a number of occasions. And on at least one occasion, we have reporting that places him in Prague with a senior Iraqi intelligence official a few months before the attack on the World Trade Center.